rather than doing a chalk and talk or a PowerPoint version of chalk and talk, I thought we could I could show you a few slides, and then you can ask me some questions, we can have a sort of discussion, and then move on to a few more slides. That way we make it a bit more interactive, okay? I was trying to think what's happening in the world, and today seems quite a good day to discuss it. Being the inauguration of the new president, whether you like it or not, it is what it is. So I thought, I had a few ideas, and what struck me the most was pluralism. Pluralism essentially is, we all come from different backgrounds with different views, different approaches, and I feel pluralistic views are under attack. Let me expand on that. I'll show you a few slides and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. So pluralistic view is a very vague term, so we need to put some bones to this. So let's start off with the first slide. This one. This is just a warm-up. Right? Tell me which one is fake. Which picture is fake?
Both.
You think both are fake?
I think the Newsweek one was the one that they had prepared for the next day, and they had to change it.
That's right. They'd released it already, and they had to take it back. Otherwise, it was on the newsstand. So if you get one of these on eBay, it's worth something. Okay, and the right-hand side one was an artist. And she decided to create a fake picture. Okay. So, but if you just switched on the news and you see one of these, they seem real. Okay, unless you know the full background, and that's a bit frightening, you may say. Okay, that's. So, first area of pluralism under attack is in the media. We have a concentration of ownership, and that leads to a concentration of views. Okay? Look at this. I'm sorry I can't get any bigger, but what we've got is the big 6 companies. Okay? You've got Vivendi, Time Warner, Disney, Bertelsmann, Viacom, and News Corporations. It's almost like they've carved up the world. Okay? How did that happen? Well, in 1983, this is for the US, in 1983, 90% of American media was owned by 50 companies. 1983. 2012, 90% owned by 6 companies. Okay. And does it end there? No, there's another one on the horizon, isn't there? The A&T and Time Warner. And if you switch on the business news, they'll say, oh, no, there is no conflict of interest whatsoever. It's vertical integration. But imagine being able to control the full supply chain. That really narrows what's available. Okay, so the mainstream media is basically attacking the rest of us, our pluralistic views. It's narrowing our view of the world. It's either we accept them or we don't get any proper news. It's all called fake otherwise. Okay? So, what's the problem with that? What's the problem with such concentration of ownership? Problem is, you get a biased information. Lots of biases coming in. Okay? And if you have biased information, you misdiagnose. Okay? And when you misdiagnose, you make bad decisions and bad outcomes. Okay? You end up simplifying the world. In my classroom, when I teach economics, I get year 11 students, which are about 16-year-olds. And, first day of class, first few weeks of the class, They all come up with the same view, free market is good. Free market, good. They want good and bad, that's all they want, good and evil, right? Socialism is the same as communism, so must be bad. And if you switch on the news, that's exactly how they portray socialism, okay? Profit is good, unions are bad. Well, you're bound to say that, aren't you? Because on television, in newspapers, with concentration of ownership, concentration of views, they're hardly pro-union. Okay. Then government is bad and taxes are bad and my parents pay too much tax. That's the standard view you get in class. So over the 2 years, I have to unwind that and put some critical thinking into all of this. Okay. And you have to ask yourself, where are the kids picking this up from? Is it just the news, or is it parents as well? Okay. Let's take another example of media bias. Right? At Berkeley, a professor asked his students, where does most of the cost of making an iPhone go? And he gave them 5 options. Here are the 5 major countries. And the students at Berkeley, they thought, well, 70% of the cost of making an iPhone stays in the US. Okay? All right. China, 23%. South Korea, 2%. Germany, 1%. And Japan, 4%. This is the brightest of the bright, the creme de la creme. Okay? Do you think they're right?
No,
China,
no,
100%.
China has like 90.
100% China.
You think? Well,
7.
guess what? The US is only 6%. China is only 3.6%. Okay. The parts come to China. They get assembled in China. And they get shipped out again. Does that shock you? Yeah. Right, now, if it shocks you, why are you shocked? Because what?
What we hear
Oh, yeah. All day long, that's what you hear. China, China, China. Yeah. All right. And how can we blame the kids? We're coming up with mistakes like this. Okay. Now, people like well-known thinkers like Noam Chomsky, you never see them. You never see him on CNN, right? On ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS even. Or Fox. Right? This is coming from him. He said, no one invites me there. Okay. You see him on RT. So does that make him a communist? Exactly. Right? So what's the conclusion here? Mainstream media largely ruled by 250 executives from similar backgrounds and views. Mainstream media have self-selected guardians of all news, real and fake. Okay, so if you don't get the news from CNN, that means it's what? It's not valid. So people ask me, what do you make of this fake news and real news as an economist? I seem to compare it like having fake handbags and real handbags, fake handbags and Gucci handbags. Why do you find that? Well, in terms of for news, imagine one of these companies spent huge amount of money consolidating, buying up other companies. Now you've got this major asset. Okay? You want full control of this asset. Fake news is a bit of a challenge. It's a bit of a undermines your authority. Okay? So it's in your interest that news has to be controlled. You have to be the guardian of the news. You collect the news, and what you say, how you collect it, and how you interpret it has to be the only way. Because otherwise your value of your asset goes down. Okay? A fake handbag can't be allowed under any circumstances. Similarly, a fake news can't be allowed. If there is any fake news, you have to be in charge of it. Okay? And that's how corporations want to view their product. Because as far as I'm concerned, when they give you the news, it's a product. As simple as that. They've made major investments, and they want return on that investment. Any questions on that? Any like to point out?
Where would you, and maybe you'll come on to this, but there's real or fake news, and then there's Twitter, and so, you know, there's the real news that we get through Twitter, and that there's fake news through Twitter as well. So where would you put Twitter on that spectrum, as it were?
Twitter.
Or any of the other social media news streams?
Well, this is where the next challenge is, isn't it? If you look at the aggregates, do you know what the aggregates are? Huffington Post is an aggregate. Business Insider is an aggregate. Basically, you know, you can open up your own news service. All you do is get 100 people in a room, give them lots of full computers and laptops, tell them to read newspapers, and paraphrase or put that same story in your own words and put it out. Well, the next race is basically mainstream media wants to buy up these aggregates. They want to buy up Huffington Post, they want to buy up Business Insider. And Business Insider has said very clearly, we're open to be bought up. Okay? So that's where I think then it's all about consolidation, control of the media. Okay.
I have a question as well. I recently watched an interview with Peter Diamandis from Singularity University. And actually it was a study showing that most media companies focus on the negative stuff to create fear, because amygdala reacts first to fear. And therefore, if you ask people, do a global survey, which they did, if we live better today than in the past, most will say no, with the terrorist attacks and all this political turmoil and so on. Whereas if you analyze it properly, it is yes, we live much better today than in the past. We have better times today.
Yeah.
Which sources are credible based on your research, or more credible, not credible? What do you do? So on one hand, you're bombed by negative news. The amygdala starts consciously or unconsciously, it doesn't matter. And then how do you choose the right channels?
Right. At the moment, we're getting bombarded with Russia did this, Russia hacked this, Russia hacked that. Now, every channel, everywhere I go, is Russia this. You know, so the American elections are been tainted by Russia. I thought about this and I said, okay, what's the U.S. defense budget? Anyone like tell me, how big is the U.S. defense budget?
3 billion, 10 billion?
700 billion.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay? It's bigger than the next 10 biggest countries put together. Okay? And if you add NATO in there, which is an alliance to the US interests, it's well over $1 trillion, no problem. Now, how big is the UK budget, defense budget? About 52 billion. How big is the Russian defense budget, according to the CIA?
200, 300 billion.
48. Now, you're telling me that's a threat, is it?
Goliath and David.
So you've got 700 billion, plus all the NATO countries, which are allied, and then you've got Russia, which is 48 billion. That gives you some kind of perspective. How big is Russia? How big a threat is Russia? Okay. And I'm sure you can find your answer there. You know. So sometimes I look behind it. I like to draw the curtain and see behind, what's the real situation. Okay, let's go on. Shall I go on to the next set of slides? You're going to say something?
Okay, I'll come back to it. Yeah.
Okay. Still on the Commonwealth side, look at this, trust in mass media. Doesn't matter if you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat. It's been going down, isn't it, since 1997. It's not just this election. Okay? I think people are a bit fed up. Really are fed up. Okay? with more information on through the internet, you're finding people are saying, hey, I don't have to listen to this CNN or ABC or whatever it is. Okay. Look at this one. This is the day before the election, 7th of November. 7th of November. Now, if you look at this, no wonder Newsweek came up with what? The front page. Not only are they drinking the Kool-Aid, they're feeding the Kool-Aid to each other. Yeah. How wrong can you be? Nobody asked those questions. It must be Russia. Okay. The second area where pluralism is under attack is a concentration of resources. Okay. Extreme maldistribution causes a lot of problems, not just in income and wealth, but of opportunities. Okay, so a certain amount of inequality, you want that because it rewards the talented, the hardworking, the risk-taking. But the problem lies when does inequality become inequity, unfair. Okay, so there are three areas of inequity: inequity in income, inequity in opportunity, inequity in healthcare. I want to look at. Look at this one. This is inequalities in the Anglo-Saxon countries. Okay? It's what we call the five sisters. In this case, it's six. Yeah. Inequalities have been increasing. They decreased in the 60s and all the way till about mid-70s, and then boom. This is the time when neoclassical economists start ruling the world. Okay. The Nordic countries seem more equal.
What is the green one?
This must have been an oil effect when the oil price collapsed. Okay. And then you've got a continental Europe, okay, not following the same model, but getting there. Inequality is beginning to move up. My figures only go up to about 2005, so needing 10 more years of data, I bet it's worse.
Oh yes.
For clearly.
Over the next in Germany is
Right.
very evident.
Yeah. Okay. And then you got developing countries, again. They're accelerating towards further inequalities. Because once they start using the globalization model, the neoclassical model, that's exactly what happens. And we knew it. We knew if we start globalizing, there's inequalities are going to go up. All the textbooks say, everyone says that. But what did you do about it? Well, the American theory was, well, if the pie is bigger, if there's economic growth, it will automatically be distributed. And there's nothing in the rule book which says automatically things get distributed. Okay. This is my favorite. So you got Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, compensation of $100 million odd dollars. Okay. These guys from Harvard Business Review said, went to people in different countries, did some surveys. He said, what's your ideal ratio between CEO and average worker? And Australia, it came out to be about 8.3. CEO on average ideally should be earning about 8.3 times more than an average worker. Did the same exercise in all the different countries, and you find This is how what the actual is, and this is where ideal is.
Look at
Which-
the,
sorry?
The Danish, the Norwegian, and the Swedish answers between 2 and 2.5, right?
That matches with the previous slide, doesn't it? Very much
So
clearly.
That's a broad query to a general population base, right?
That's right.
That's very interesting.
You know, they use taxation very much as a way of equalizing, of bringing in equities.
Switzerland, UK.
Okay. All right. Now, if you put that in terms of actual dollars, you get these sort of differentials: 34,000 and 12 million. Okay. Now, instead of saying, well, that the way the media portrays it is okay. They're paid because they're so talented. Okay. But if you do it in terms of ideal, right? I'm from Switzerland, so my average pay should be 1.4 million. So if my boss is listening, I'd like to have a nice, get with it. Okay? All right. So are we clear on that? Does that shock you? I mean, this, you'd say, this is absurd. Well, if that's absurd, then the other thing should be absurd as well.
Where does
Yeah.
the ideal come from?
Just by asking people in the street.
And what sort of numbers are you talking to get to those?
You have to ask the Harvard guys. Okay? All right. Okay. This is the next type of inequality, inequality of opportunity. Economists use what we call intergenerational income elasticity. Okay. The highest social mobility were Norway, the Scandinavians. Less than 20% of the advantages are passed on, a parent passes on to the kid. Okay. And in Denmark, just over about 15% of the advantages a parent has can be passed on in terms of opportunity to their sons and daughters. What that means, if you believe that if you work hard you can go up the ladder, then the lower the elasticity, the better it is. You can do better than your parent did. Okay. The opportunity is there. But you're finding that the UK and the US are in a world of their own. Okay, the UK maybe, I don't know, the class system perhaps. The US, the income differential is so huge. From cradle to the grave, you can be super rich and never have to deal with the rest of the world. Okay. These are all changeable. You can change all of these, through policies. There's no problem with that. Okay. It's interesting to note that these countries also are very good at allowing people further education without burdening them without the debt problem. Come out of university, all you have is massive debt. So you're forced to take on any job which is going. Okay, so you limit your options basically. Debt round your neck at that early age really leaves a scar. Okay.
Do you know how this has changed over the years? Because clearly in the US, for example, historically there was a belief that people could come from nothing and
I get the feeling in lots and lots of countries, not just the US, is the state is relinquishing its responsibilities. No, you deal with your own education, you deal with your own pension, They just don't want to take the responsibility. Those nationalized industries, let's sell them off, privatize everything. Okay. We'll just provide the security and bump up the defense budget all the time. Get this feeling.
And sadly, they're also exponentially variant on the racial divide. Like these numbers are even worse in
Oh, yes.
different racial populations. I only seen U.S. data.
That's
It's
right.
dramatically worse than this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're finding everywhere. The state is just relinquishing responsibilities. We don't want to make that social contract anymore. Even state pensions. Well, don't. There's no guarantee you will get a decent state pension. You'll get something, but there's no. But when you look at it in real terms, in fact, it's a fall in state pensions. Okay. That social contract where we contribute for the people who are retired, and when we retire, people who are working pay for us. That is breaking down.
Do you look? You're talking about pluralism. Have you looked at the Middle East, for instance, data?
Middle East data, it's just as bad. Because in those societies, you get ahead by knowing somebody. Not only that, if your parents are well off, they usually have more connections. Okay?
And more so you find than in these particular countries to the left?
Yes. Oh, yes. Okay. We're finding that. Relationship between social mobility and inequalities. The greater the level of inequality, clearly, is highly correlated with falling social mobility. I think I mentioned earlier, that you're creating a world of what? Elites and serfs. This is exactly where it's leading to. Especially when the state doesn't want to take on the responsibility of providing a safety net. Yeah. What's it like globally? Well, you go to Davos and they'll say, well, guess what? The world is more equal now than ever before. But what they really mean is this part. In the less developed countries, you're finding China and India basically make up this. They've grown. Okay, they've globalized. Okay, major beneficiaries. So you find multinationals, they want to go there. Okay. Well, right here, this part, the middle classes or low middle classes in the rich countries, taking a massive hit. And their only answer is go get yourself an education. But getting an education is one thing, but what to do with it is something else. Okay. That they won't tell you which area to go in. They say, all of you just turn into mathematicians. Just do sciences and you'll be all right. Okay.
Yeah, that's the most unique graph you put up yet, right? And the others kind of reconfirm themselves, but the 20-year, the Asian middle class compared to the US and Western, I think it's very interesting.
I think this is still going to continue, this part. Okay. But again, with globalization, we knew the inequality problems. There'll be losers in this, but no safety net brought in. Okay. You just have to be happy with your cheap mobile phones and laptops. Whereas healthcare, big portion of your income. Education, big portion of your income. Those costs have been going up way faster than inflation. Okay. In my field, textbooks. Price of textbooks, just rocketing. How can a maths textbook cost keep going up? 2 plus 2 is the same as it was 20 years ago. It's in the public domain. There's no copyright on that. How can that cost any more now than before? If you look at it, calculus is still the same as it was 50 years ago. So I think one way is a lot of these books have to come into the public domain and not be copyright. Okay. Universities, schools can actually write their own textbooks because all the material is there. Instead of buying newer and newer editions. How can you have a new edition of Matt's book? Yeah. Seems like contradiction in terms. This is the danger. And already you're seeing that, aren't you, in Vancouver and San Francisco? The housing market's there. You're getting a two-world, aren't you? Because as soon as you allow anyone from anywhere with any kind of money just to come in and buy anything you like, you get this speculation. Massive speculation in the housing market. Okay, next area of attack. Is this one. In the political system and leadership. I've got pluralism there, elitism here. I think most of us still believe in this. And we think this is what's been happening. You've got the powers to be passing on, using the mainstream media as a conduit, coming down to the community level, social movements, and being listened to. But in fact, I think we're going closer to this model. Yeah. Power coming down, media just being used or complicit, especially with the concentration of power, and then telling you what to do in your communities. Social movements, not interested. Unless what? It supports the elite. Okay. So you've got pluralism, elitism, populism. I was looking at the definition of populism. In the 1890s, US populist movement pitted rural populations and Democratic Party against the urban Republicans. 360 now, isn't it? Totally different. Okay, let's see where we put these following characters. Pluralist, elitist, or populist? President of the European Commission. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, other people agree it's okay to lie when anything's that serious, but we don't tell our children not to lie, don't we? But this guy is, what kind of role model is he? Yeah. So whenever he's telling the truth, I don't even know he's telling the truth anymore. Okay, that's the danger. Why do I believe him in anything? Whenever he's telling the truth or a lie, I don't care. How about this one?
That's what you said. Pretty stupid.
Yeah, president. You see?
So the finger.
Yeah, I don't think he meant it that way, but that's why I chose it, Oh dear, oh dear.
Non-verbal communication is non-verbal communication.
That's right. Yeah. Pictures speaks 1,000 words. Him. Right. Elitist, populist. Populist. Yeah. What's the danger of populism? You get this demagogue mentality. Rights of minorities rule. Change as you feel like it.
End of the state of right.
Absolutely. Okay. How about this one? What ism is he? He sounds like I haven't got a clue, ism. I love his defense. I can't start wars in places where I can't find them on the map.
That's very true. He's in time. You don't know when to correct your missile. think Aleppo when you hit Aberdeen.
Exactly. About her. Most of her life she's been a public servant. But she has $280 million. What kind of job is that? Pays that kind of money if you're a public servant.
But she knows it.
At least she acknowledges.
You know?
That she's
So
a-
hiding
Doesn't
But we're
make-
doing the same here. We're preaching to the converted. Like we're nodding.
Mhm.
We're actually behaving by like how it should. There's no pluralism in this room right now. Because
There is no pluralism, you're saying?
well, I don't know. I'm just asking myself.
What I'm asking is this
We've finally
elitism
seen
or
the
pluralism or
Democrat now.
populism? First of all,
It's still elitism.
it's still elitism, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Right. You might use fancy words. Okay, you might have better grasp of the English language, but it's still elitism.
And we still like her, but it's still elitism.
I mean,
It's still
it was
elitism.
elitism when the Kennedys were in power. It's been elitism for a while, hasn't it?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. There is a sort of major move. Let's create a political dynasty. You know, always try and get a political dynasty going.
Although I worry about the use of the word dynasty to the Clintons because it's a husband and wife, and when you think of a dynasty, it implies many generations. So I think it's a bit misused. You know, the Clintons is not a dynasty; it's a husband and wife.
Well, what about all the people working for them?
Yeah, that's
Guess what? I mean,
The Bushes might be more of a dynasty because it's
okay. In which case, they've just bought a property in a district in the US where there's a Senate seat coming up. Clinton.
Elisa?
All right? And that Senate seat means Chelsea can get onto the board.
So yes, I would
It's in
accept
motion.
dynasty
It's in motion.
yes, but it's not a dynasty yet.
In
No.
the same way.
But it's the visions of let's get a dynasty going. Okay. All right. All right. We don't want to just end it there. We want to carry on. Okay. Oh, I've been there through this one. Ah. And see any difference? Again, clearly populist. Okay. We know some of these quotes. Okay. I think the last one says it all, doesn't it? The use of language.
A tradition.
well, it's a degree of consciousness that's really.
He talks in hyperboles all day long. Okay. Next slide, please. Is it? Look at this one. Do we really need a personality-driven system, whether it's, left or right or elitist, populist? Or do we need something new? My personal opinion is I prefer the Swiss system, where you vote on issues, irrespective who's up there. I ask my students, do you know who the president of Switzerland is?
I don't know.
No. All right. Then I ask the second question, do you really need to know who the president of Switzerland is? Is it important? Answer is not really. Right? Whereas in other countries, if you don't know the president, oh, you can't be, no, you can't be in love with this country.
That's a very interesting system that they have in Switzerland. It's collegial.
Yeah. It's very much, we vote 4 times a year on 4 or 5 issues each time. And, you know, it's issue-based. I just got some envelope yesterday on the next referendum, which I have to do some research on, you know. Along with the voting paper, they also tell you, you know, which party, the different views of different parties. You choose. Then you can do your own research if you wish. Okay. And the business party will give you a certain view. Okay, jobs will always be. If you vote no, the jobs will be lost. That's the usual scare tactic. You know. But you don't have to fall for that. But you have a lot more choice, because if you look at it, some things you are more right wing, other things you're more left wing. You know, you can't have one party which represents all your views. We are pluralists. Some things I agree with Kelly, at the same time many things I don't agree with you. Yeah. Okay? So how can I vote for her and not vote for her at the same time? It has to be issue based. And I think the electorate sooner or later will catch on to that. They say we're just getting fed up. You know, left and right doesn't make sense anymore. Okay, we just want we want our voices heard through issues. And how old is the Swiss direct democracy? 1890s. So the Swiss model is nothing new.
It started earlier, but
even, yeah, that's right. That's right. It started even earlier. Okay. The way we see today is basically 1890s and onwards. And the latest thing is actually I can vote through the internet. They're doing a lot of work by voting through internet.
While I see your point, I'm thinking about Brexit, which was a referendum on an issue, and yet it wasn't broken down to a level that people were able to really understand and then vote kind of intelligently. So I mean, there are issues with voting on issues as well, and it makes it very hard. So that just comes to mind for me, because a bunch of people came out afterwards and said, oh, I didn't know what I was voting for, right?
Exactly.
And that wasn't for a party, it wasn't for a person, it was specifically for an issue. So how do you respond to that?
Firstly, how often do you get referendums?
In the UK, oh, very infrequently.
Right, so it becomes very emotional.
I see.
On television, it's like a slang match. You know? The critical analysis is all lost. People don't read enough. Even if you read mainstream media, it tells you one view, another paper tells you another view, and that's about it. Okay? So over time, what happens is these referendums can get quite boring. But what you do get are the facts coming out. All right? It was made into such a big thing, all or nothing. You either vote for Brexit or don't vote for Brexit. But if you have regular referendums, it's just another issue. It becomes just another issue. Some issues become a bit more important than others, but it becomes another issue.
I don't want to break your
no, go for it.
Stream of thought. But what I really find very difficult to reconcile and to bring into connection is what we observe in the political sphere, and we have described all that, and that's going in the wrong direction, with more populism and less reflection and less respect for minorities and all what you have called it. Our area is much more business, smaller companies, large corporations, global corporations that have a heavy, people spend at least half of their, 1/3 of their day, if not more, in that reality. And if you look at Gallup and the degree of engagement, it shows how many are not engaged, but it shows it as a problem. People want to be engaged. People are looking for possibilities to be engaged, and they have the right criteria. When we look at return on character and what comes back to us, people want to be taken care of in terms of having development opportunities. So, and the third element that is more kind of supporting the last, what I said, is the increasing public awareness and criticism and lesser tolerance for unethical behavior. So that's positive, I would say. So but how to reconcile these two, that on one side, and it's the same people at the end, in many instances, yeah, who vote for populists, but at the same time, when they're asked perhaps about a sphere that is more close to their everyday life, the 8 hours at work and so on, they do know what's right and wrong, and that's what they want. And they want to be respected and not to be lied at. So how to reconcile these two spheres? I find a certain contradiction that I think is, I don't really get to grips with it. Yeah, and see what are really the factor of influences here.
Yeah, and also just to add to that, I also feel that with the millennials and the new generations,
yeah,
there are much more demands.
Positive influences, positive
all
drives.
of the mindfulness movement,
Yeah.
all of this realization that this model is actually not working out. And so what's your view on how able they will be to shape?
I think the young people are actually saying, I'm not interested in left and right. I'm more interested in the issue. You know, and with internet savvy, if you trust internet banking, there's no reason why you can't trust internet voting on different issues. I think different parts of the U.S. in San Francisco they have some direct democracy referendums, don't they? Or bringing in,
Washington State
yeah,
does as well.
that reflects the mood of the people much more, okay, than lobbyists or manipulists. Yeah.
Are young people in Switzerland saying we want to vote on issues, or is it general? Because
Generally.
Because in Switzerland they are used to it.
That's right. That's right. I'm saying generally,
There's similar movement in Germany and so on.
That's right.
There are other places
yeah.
as well. It's not only the particular.
And people in power haven't caught on. They don't know how to react, perhaps. And the politicians hate this direct democracy because it means they become obsolete, in fact.
What do you
Yes.
see as the negatives of an issue-based system?
Firstly, if you have too many referendums, you might just not bother voting. Secondly, the phrasing might be so intricate and it requires so much research that it can be discouraging or demotivating. Oh, I can't be bothered voting. But as long as you get a sufficiently large sample right across the country, even if everyone doesn't show up and vote, you'll find it's okay. You can get a reasonable wisdom of the crowd.
What's the turnout in Swiss referenda? I don't know what the level of participation is.
I think it's well about 50-60%. Old people vote more than young ones.
But you also need a pretty well-educated population, because if you're going to do that in Brazil with the levels of inequality, how can you have people have no idea what they're voting on? So
well, unless we start, we can't say, well, you don't deserve a vote because you're not educated enough. We have to move on towards that, because this is just not acceptable anymore. This is I don't know how old this kind of thinking is.
Sorry. I'm not sure if it's the case still, but in Canada, if we had put the death penalty to referendum, it would have passed. The death penalty would be legal in Canada, and the death penalty is still illegal. Regardless of what we think about the death penalty, our government the elite has defended the position that we are not going to have the death penalty in Canada.
The previous government.
Well, a government down the line, and it's been maintained since. So I just give it as an example that when you go to that referendum, should you leave everything to popular vote?
No, this is where my job comes in. Because my job is basically to educate in class. We leave the emotions out, and let's deal with the death penalty as an issue, and look at it in an objective way.
Okay, well, first of all, having no emotional reasoning in argumentation, I don't agree with. So just there, you've lost me. Right. But I agree. For me, it's not contradictory. I really, even though I'm quite the Cartesian, I'm French at heart, so I'm all for cognitive dominance of thought. I have changed since my mind about it. So already there, that's probably why I'm resisting some. So leaving all emotions aside, I understand you can't for instance, I always say, if someone touches my child, I will kill them personally. I'll take care of the death penalty on my own, but I'm still against the death penalty. So yeah, and you can help me, and I think everyone in this room. So I understand that you take the emotion out, because otherwise it's not about me, but it's not about me. It's not about me and my child. That's a sample size of one with baggage that doesn't make sense for a nation. So I completely agree with that. But saying we take away all emotions out of it, that breaks my heart.
Well, what are some of the other views? I mean, how am I supposed to teach a subject like that in class?
So what's the subject?
Whether we should install a death penalty or not. Yeah.
I'm not sure the current generation would be. I don't know what the data would be now. Like, I don't know what.
If that discussion occurs on television, it's full of emotion. Okay, and it's only done in what, 90 minutes?
Yeah, but that's because also you're taking, like, just this was full of emotion. You showed us only examples that were repulsive from Republicans. And we saw one Democrat. We saw one photo of a Democrat.
Oh, I can find you some more.
No, exactly. But you didn't choose those. You chose the ones that would resonate, and you know.
I only chose what? How many Republicans did I choose?
You chose only right wing, mostly.
I chose
Trump,
Berlusconi. They were together, right? Yeah. And the other guy was
maybe I didn't know who one of them was. Where there's also that, but the ones I recognize. Okay, so perhaps I mean,
I showed Clinton.
Anyhow,
I showed Clinton, which was clearly a Democrat.
Yeah.
My intention was to show the other side, which was just as.
No, exactly. But I'm saying, and I got that. I'm just saying, anyhow. So we all do it, right? We want to tell a story. We tell it from the way we think we're gonna have that emotive. You got us in here, right? Well, it's in here, our heart. Actually, it's not in here. It's here. But you got us through our heart, right? Through our emotions. So.
But a subject like the death penalty. Mm-hmm. How do we come to a conclusion whether we vote for it or not vote for it? Do we just leave it to these elites? Or the populists?
Well, in this case, I was pleased that they did, because at least we don't have the death penalty in Canada, because it's hard to come back from the death penalty. Once something is in place, it's like taxes. They've added taxes that were temporary, like 15 years ago for 2 years. So I'm just saying some things are hard to come back from. So if you want to change that, in this case, I'm grateful the left is in the hands of the elite, and I'm not an elite.
But in fact, with direct democracy, you can overturn it.
Sure.
Okay, you can overturn it. You say, okay, let's vote for a death penalty, and as time goes on, we're saying there are too many mistakes being made on this. Let's have a new referendum.
Yeah, you can.
And see what the people think.
And I do think, as you said, the force of habit of going through it probably changes the culture of a nation, that you have this responsibility. You know how to do referendum. Like you're good at referendum. And we're clearly not.
But again, I mean, the thing about direct democracy is that, okay, some things will go through which you don't agree with. But as time goes by, you gather new information and you say, hey, maybe that was a bad decision. We can get new votes and put another referendum in to counteract the previous one.
I don't know.
Okay. I just want to make a comment about my own relationship to the news, actually, which over the last decade has probably kind of reduced, because I had a kind of inkling of what you're talking about, really, which is where do I find the views that are really opposing in a way that kind of, so I can actually really have a richer view, So and I understand, that, so if I am on Brexit, certainly, I found as if most of the people I spoke to hated the idea of Brexit, and I found it very difficult to hear rational views from people who really wanted Brexit. It was, and in a way I end up feeling quite disempowered and disinterested. Like I want to live my life in some kind of little bubble rather than connect with this thing that's sort of out of my control anyway. I don't feel I can influence it. Does it make sense? It's like, what do I do to get information that's a little bit richer and?
You need to widen your group of friends.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But not through the internet, because the internet just gives me things that showed my searches the last time. Do you know what I mean? Like Google just keeps on throwing me more information.
I mean, for example, I listen to a lot of discussions on the internet, which normally you'd never be able to do that before. Podcasts and all sorts of things, even our discussion now will be put on the internet, because then let somebody else decide where the arguments are. Okay, so I tend to learn a lot from different points of view by doing, searching. Okay, what those views.
One of the things that so some people have heard the story already, but my husband predicted both Brexit and the Trump presidency. Not that he was sort of triumphant about either of those, but I question myself and him as to how come he got it right and I got it so wrong. And I realised that what he does is expose himself to a much wider range of views, of reading, of thinking. If Marine Le Pen is on the television, he stays there and listens to her, whereas I walk out of the room because I have this terrible reaction to her. And I realise that my reading tends to be more narrow but in depth, and I sort of surround myself with social media and friends who think likewise. So that's one of my challenges this year for myself, is to get that breadth.
This is exactly one of the slides which is coming up.
Yeah.
Let me show you this one. Can anyone tell me what the mistake is?
Somebody edited it. Someone might clear it.
The public services, they impose burdens on the taxpayers.
I think it's the jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens. They don't want those jobs.
Americans are really started the immigrations versus.
Continued state is a fact.
What does he mean by all Americans?
Yeah.
Okay, shall I tell you the mistake?
It's good that there's only one.
Yeah, I was just going to say it wasn't Donald Trump.
Oh, I forgot. I said somebody edited it because he wouldn't have made a coherent sentence like
Yeah.
that. That's what the dots were. I thought somebody got
This is Clinton.
That's Clinton.
Really?
Well, we don't learn from history, do we? We've been there before.
Can you go back to it again?
Huh?
Can we look at it again?
It
Opinion stated as a fact at first.
But it says Donald Trump on the bottom.
That's the mistake.
Very good. Yeah, well.
Well, I would have not expected really from Trump this half sentence, but we are also a nation of laws, because Trump has not spoken a lot about that so far. That I was.
He talks about bringing law and order back. I mean, that's
Yeah.
It's our biases at the end of the day. It's exactly like the Simon Sinek book, Start With Why. It's exactly how it starts the book.
That's what you said. It's this era of neoliberalism, and Clinton is part of that, 100%.
Who signed the legislation to promote consolidation in media?
Yeah.
Clinton.
Who dysregulated the banks?
It's supposed to be a Democrat. The Democratic Party today doesn't seem to reflect its roots at all. In fact, it might as well be call themselves Republicans.
But he's part of that mainstream.
Okay. Really what you want us is, well, I don't know what you want us actually, I'm not going to speak for you, but the idea is somewhere, like you were saying, your husband and you is the example. In other words, I got it so wrong, and he was right on because he was more open. And for instance, sometimes I'll go on social media elsewhere, and I'll look at the comments that make me the most react, and I look at the conversations behind it. I mean, and sometimes, luckily, I'm sitting down because I'm like, wow, I didn't even know this language exists. Some words I don't even know in English, and I know quite a few. And they're insults that are really profound. So there's a lot of, you talk about emotions, but I find emotion is telling me a lot about the pain and angst of these people. In other words, I'm just seeing such anger that wasn't heard and obviously led to something that's happening today in Washington. And yet, when we lack pluralism, which I'm still not sure, in other words, we tend to gravitate towards people like us who think like us, read press like that represents our, we don't go reading something that's so opposite because it just makes us cringe, right? We tend to reassure ourselves. So I still don't think we're there with all the good intention in the world.
Well, maybe that's kind of the point of the dynamic. I mean, hearing an educator who's just talking about critical thinking skills, right, for our children, I mean, at 16, 17 years old, and as 40 and 50-year-olds looking at that, it's a great re-emphasis to us, because I look at it in the frame of our research of character, and one of the main findings was that the virtuoso leaders had a level of mental complexity that was significant, and that they were able to challenge their own views, and they didn't live just in that bubble. And it's an outstanding reminder that as a leader that led to business results on a quantifiable scale, that we, as mature citizens, very well educated as a cohort and a socio-demographic group, to be able to remind ourselves about that complexity that we need to challenge ourselves with. And I loved your example of your husband, and I'll conclude quickly, and I have one question on the media. For me, I internalize that, and I think about the experiences that I've had of travel and living in different countries, and very good successes as an individual and family, and also some real big challenges, right, and problems that I've run into, and issues. And I look at the media that I consume and that I work towards, and it's my exposure to other groups through my hobbies. I like old cars and working on engines, and I love different sports, and that's exposed me to this completely kind of different group that I normally habitate within, within my family and in school or groups, and that, in this election specifically, has caused me to really look at the media that I consume, and not just go out and hug another, but try to have those conversations, right, to understand how people can be coming from a place that when I read those articles, I have an emotional gut reaction that's so strong to it. So I've really challenged myself a ton on that. I thought I was doing it. I think I was doing more than some, but not nearly enough. And that goes back to the media. And my question is, if we've gone from 50 groups that had 90% of the media to 6 that had 90%, your thesis is that that was a bad thing, okay? That there's bias inherent. My question is, you then use the term bombarded earlier, and I would say that the media aggregators and others, there is a bombardment that occurs, and where does that line get drawn? Because I will tell you that I like going to 3 or 4 sources that I know are legitimate and confirmed in reading different opinions on the two, maybe rather than being bombarded by a lot of other sources. So I felt a little bit of a not immediate thesis acceptance of a consolidation leads to bias.
I think the more varied our lives are, meaning the more different things we do, the more different types of people we meet. Okay, provided they're not watching the same 6 sources of news, you're more likely to get different views. Okay, coming from different ethnicity, different backgrounds, different languages, and so on and so forth, you're more likely to get a pluralistic view. That's my point, is you can't let the concentration of media to this extent. You can't let it go on to this extent. Then it doesn't matter which religion or which background you're from, you'll end up with the same view. And superficially, you think you've got a different perspective, but you really haven't.
But we also need to recognize there's bias in media. Like over those time, you said from 1997 to 2005 about your data was gathered.
That's right.
In 1997, I'm not so certain the media was completely I don't believe in unbiased media. It's still coming from, it's still presented in 1997 by a white Western man, for instance, in 1997. Let's say if we look at TV, which I didn't. And I watch less and less TV, it's true, because I don't know how to turn it on, actually. That's another issue. But and it's true, but I resisted, I think. But I'm not, I think we have to also accept it's biased. Like, we can't think there's pure information, right? Because what we think is, oh, well, I saw it on TV, it must be true. We know that's not true now. Like, we know, though we're tempted to believe it because we saw it, right? It's this bias we have that if we see it or read it, it must be true. I just don't want to believe in the credibility of the media, the unbiasedness of it, because if you look at the events, for instance, November 13, I live in Paris, I was in Paris, and I watched Al Jazeera, in English obviously, because I don't understand Arabic, but I watch Al Jazeera in English, Fox, and CNN. I ask my children to turn on the TV. And just to see what are they saying differently, how are they perceiving this? And it was not identical. but it's still super biased, right? Because on November 13th, a lot of other things happened in the world, and yet we were talking about this one event because it's the Western world. So it was hugely biased, regardless, even though it was presented in 3 slightly different medias. So I'm just saying media is biased, is by definition. When we present information by choosing it, they chose the world to talk about Paris. Charlie Hebdo, same thing. That same day in Nigeria, a whole village disappeared in the north of Nigeria. 2,000 people approximately disappeared from the map. It was neither in African news nor in any international news. If it was on page 8. So I'm just saying there's already a bias in the choice of what you're presenting in terms of, and you have to, right? Because there's so much stuff going on. There has to be choice. So I'm just, it's not a question and it's not a comment. It's just an observation and probably very personal frustration, perhaps, or something. It's a feeling of, it's hard.
I mean, I agree
It's
with
hard.
you. Have you noticed at the top of the hour when you switch on the news, or just before the top of it, always sports, and it's the same 3 sports?
Yes.
You mean to say that that's the only thing which is going on in the whole world?
Clearly.
Where's the pluralistic values there, pluralistic views there?
Well,
Nothing.
there's something I would like to add to this because you're talking about everything that is coming on to us, but I would like to say don't forget your own power, that you have the ability to choose whether you want to see something or to believe something, yes or no. And I really validate myself enough to see that whatever is giving to me, that I can choose, and that I choose whether I would like to believe it, yes or no, based on just my normal, whatever my thinking. How do you say it? My brains or whatever it is, instead of getting and stepping into the mind fucking of, excuse me for the word, but the mind fucking of that everything that is shown to us, that we immediately have our feelings or emotions about it, so that we think it's true. So we have the ability to split into the fact versus the opinion.
Suppose the other thing you can do, you can watch CNN and then watch RT and average it. You know?
Or just
Well, no.
accept
It's
all
just
the
also
different
that
views.
these people make news. So if they make news, I can make news too from a different perspective, which is the creativity of the brain, and we all do have it. The only thing is maybe we start to become lazy and not using it enough. That's what I would like to
Just to
add.
build on that, there was a great piece of it. Is it Bill Mayer? Is that who you-
Bill Mayer.
Who was talking, I saw his piece, he's an American commentator, I don't know how you describe it.
He's also a comic. He's a comic
Yeah,
and
comic.
commentator. He's like Jon Stewart. So he really has 2 chapeaus that he bears at the same time.
So he was talking about something that Noam Chomsky had said, which was that most people have the ability to have a fantastic critical analysis of what's happening with their favourite football team. They can tell you the history, they can tell you the different personalities, the dynamics, they have a commentary on the manager, they have a commentary on the match play and whatever goes on in football. You know, maybe I could do the same for tennis. So they have that critical ability, that critical thinking ability about something like that, and yet choose or don't apply it to something as important as Brexit. So they just accept what comes at them from the media for, say, Brexit. And then Bill Mayer went on and said, I don't know if Noam Chomsky said this, but Bill Mayer went on and said, that's because people are lazy.
It's also more complex. Brexit is a bit more complex than a football.
The stakes are slightly different too.
The stakes are different,
Like
but he was
whether
saying that
Real Madrid wins or
Stop.
not.
that people can talk in a complex way about their favourite sport, their favourite football. They can go back to the past, they can project to the future, they can give you statistics, they can give you quite a critical and complex analysis of that, and yet don't use that same critical faculty for something more complex, as Brexit, but they still have that ability to do it.
Can I go on further? Let me show you something. All right, you've done that. Oh, sorry. Technology abuse. That's the fourth one. What do these two pictures have in common? The
Pain,
tank man,
war, pain,
war, pain, so on and so forth.
negative,
Okay,
Photojournalism.
right.
fear.
It's real news, right? You agree with that? Both are banned. Both were banned. The Chinese government, if you go on the Chinese website, you can't see the tank man. Facebook banned us using the algorithms.
It wasn't you call that a ban?
You have to ask permission from Facebook whether to put it on. Since when do we have that? Where's that freedom? That I have to ask Zuckerberg to let me post this on Facebook.
As long as
Let's be
this
clear, it's
company is
because
not
of the nudity, yeah? This is how it
Yes,
came
but I'm
out.
saying-
No, because people might be wondering, because when I first saw this, I thought, why would they? And then it was the nudity.
Do you really believe this yourself?
What?
That it's
That's
about
the reason?
unity? It's
No, I'm
she's
saying
saying
the
that's
reason
what
was
she's
that
saying.
it was
Something
flagged.
That's right.
Nudity.
That's why it was flagged and
Because
banned.
it was flagged by an algorithm.
This is the algorithm doing it. Okay? To me, there's no difference. Okay? There's no difference. It's at the end of the day, it's banned. Okay? And if I, where do I speak as an individual to Zuckerberg? Look, what are you doing this for? Luckily, a Swedish newspaper took up the challenge, and they have more of a say, and they can ask Zuckerberg, hey, can you deal with this? But you and I would have no say. Okay? That bothers me.
If you don't mind, going back to the reasons we are here, there are two things. First of all, I find it's an opportunity to do something, and what I think at least you do with ROC and you by teaching it, and each of you by putting some values in your work. I think this, on one hand, we all see the society sinking in a mud of non-values. We are terrified and horrified by it. And what can we do? How can we take it into an opportunity? That's the point, because otherwise it's scary. It's like we are small ants in this huge global. It's like it's a never-ending story. Why do we do what we do? It's like for nothing. We are small businesses towards 600 billion or 700 billion defense budget, or 997 billion deception amount money in the US. 997 billion a year, the amount of deception in the US. This is a study, then a real study. The same 600 billion fraud at work in the US
What
a
is
year.
that? We're all having a question mark. The deception?
997 billion dollars.
Deception, what does it mean?
Deficit.
No, deception.
Fraud. It means
All
fraud.
kinds of deception.
Fraud, okay.
Fraud.
Okay, the value of...
The value of deception in the US
Value of
is
corruption.
Unethical behavior, if you will, or...
997 a year, 7% of the GDP. Yeah.
It's a business.
600 fraud at workplace, US. So we are living in a society that is talking about nice stuff, but it's actually doing the wrong stuff. Yeah, this is the bottom line. This is how you.
Well, this is where we have laws, and we want our leaders to pursue, and we can't have rules for one group and different rules for another group. This is where we want hey, if you do something wrong, there is somebody out there to get you. Right? And it doesn't matter how big or small you are, or how many billions of dollars behind your name,
But is it? Because this is the point. Is it someone? At the end of the day, we see other examples of someone, inequalities, inequities, unfair stuff, fraud, Lehman Brothers, whatever, stealing, mistrust, greed. It's everywhere. It's like all the breakfast and lunch and dinner. The issue is 2 points. I feel after these things, we are very small and we are trying to save the world, whereas the world is a bit big for what we try to do. On the other hand, I think we have to do something, and there is an opportunity to it. And I think what KRW is doing, or some or all of us are doing, is trying to improve our little environment into creating cells to expand. I don't know.
Well, part of what I think we should be looking at too is we're seeing a lot in terms of the political weight We should see what the corporate weight is.
Mhm.
Because that's what we're
Absolutely.
affected.
The corporate weight is
bigger
as ugly as this political
I
part.
know it's ugly, but that's where we're putting pressure. That's where our influence is on that corporate side. And I think in many ways the corporate side over time is going to have a greater influence than the government.
This is why. And how do we do it? Transform this into an opportunity
Yes,
here, all of
yes.
us here, and how do we?
You know, I think there's a general statement that I've heard said in different terms, different words, the idea about religion or ethnicities or even politics, right, is what can destroy relationships, or they can fracture, bridges between nations or different cultures, and yet business can build bridges, right? It historically has built bridges, and I think that's the opportunity that, we look at is business is a force for good, and
it also creates
character and-
inequities and things too. So I mean, we've got to watch for those poles as well. So
And I think on the research on business, and I've read, and the research on compassion, even though it's academic research, it's rooted in reality. Like it's rooted in actual organizations. And the reason, one of the main people who does this, her name is Jane Dutton. She's out of the University of Michigan, which is a very positive place. It's a happier place, but whatever. Think what you will. But she started to think of it for many reasons, but one of them was after 9/11. She says, I saw something after 9/11 that I needed to explain to myself, which was there were companies that were ferociously competitive before, that despised each other, like to the core, that after 9/11 reached out to the others saying, okay, you're like in clear agony and pain, what can we do to help you? I'll give you an office, I'll give you staff, you can come and stay with us, like literally, like it's like opening your home, but they were opening their office. And she said, I'd never seen that, and I wondered, how did this happen? Good is possible. Greed is good, but there's also compassion is possible. And it was opening up that world of possibilities, which joins. And it also, I think now in 2016, 17, where we're moving because of what you're expressing, that angst, leaders have that as well. Your clients have that as well. They want to do something. Like the ball's being passed now, saying, okay, clearly government is we're looking in the wrong place. President Obama can't change the world. We need to change it. You're talking to kids, so that's another responsibility too. How do you get them to think critically? And I think civil society, and speaking to people, for instance, in France, where you kind of wonder, talk about a messed up political system, and they're saying, you know what, actually civil society right now is more active than it has ever been. It's not very evident, and you're going to complain about it, and you're not seeing any of it, but it actually is, and I can give you 40 different examples of things that are happening now that never happened in the past, that are happening now. I think the French, because I complain they don't do anything. If it weren't for the Germans, no one's opening their doors. But there is stuff, like it's not hopeless. And as you say, there's this media telling us the hopelessness, but it's not hopeless. I think you're right, but I think...
Let me give you an example which is just coming up, exactly what we can do. It's happened. It's this. This is the next frontier. That so far, people power have stopped, have protected net neutrality. Even though...
How do you do that?
Well, they would ring up the senators and think, we do not want the internet to be regulated.
But I want them to keep pornography off my children's
That's a different story.
That's a different story.
It's a different, okay.
Okay, let me explain what I mean.
And I want creeps
Access.
off.
All right.
And I want, okay, I just want to know it doesn't.
Right.
And why is it different? Because this is what
This is
I
Like,
It's
it's
about-
about civil liberties.
It's
so
about
what
speed
do you
and
do
paying
otherwise?
for services, and so
That's right.
have a priority.
Let me show you what I mean.
It's the highway for the big ones.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, okay.
That's the point about net neutrality. It's not about contents.
Okay.
It's about access, right?
Look at
Yeah,
this.
no, but that's
Not content.
decision that you can.
Why should I care about net neutrality?
If you're in a position,
Yeah.
if you have enough
Yeah.
speed.
Currently, you have the big
Okay.
internet service providers. Okay, think of AT&T, if you like, and they control the pipes, which comes into your home. Okay, this is what they want. So that pipe, they want to divide up that pipe, control that pipe, and sell you bits of it. So just like Sky Television, you see it, do you not? Right? So if you want the most basic package, then you'll have a slower internet, full of ads. If you want a faster package, we can throw this in and throw that in, okay, and sell you services. That's the reason why AT&T wants to buy up Time Warner, which is a content maker. You control the pipes and you control the content, and we divide up the fiber optic into your home this way. That way, the profit margins rise. And they can control what you see, what you don't see.
The point is the greed leading all these decisions. This is, how to say this? I have goosebumps because it makes me mad. It's this greed and non-values. And just 1 minute, I don't want to steal your time. I challenged 23 CEOs at a CEO club in Bucharest once and said, give me one example of the major issue you faced in your business, and then if there is something related to competence, I go away. It was a bottle of wine I wanted to give, and said, if not, I'll take it back. And they started with the problems. And then why? Greed. Why? Mistrust, lack of ethics. No single competence-related issues, only values-related issues. And I said, it was Google CEO, Microsoft CEO, GE. I said, you all have values on the wall. So what the hell are you doing with that? And this is the point. It's like, we talk about it, but actually, even businesses, neither society or politics, nor business, neither society, the companies do actually something against it. We are complaining, but actually we are showing them to people on Facebook, but what do we do
So
to
what
stop
I would
that?
say to that, though, Radu, is that moral intelligence was telling people that they should do that was the right thing to do. And the people who agreed with it, who were in that bubble, agreed and would apply it. The reason we did the research the way we did was to tie it to greed, essentially, because now it's good for your business. That is what we hope will get them to do it. Our agenda is because it's the right thing to do, and it should be to rebalance these inequities. We would have hoped that people would have just done it for that reason. They won't. They will only do it for the greed, for the profit margin. And we're happy to have found that there's actually a connection to it. So now our joint sort of objectives are meeting. And I'm okay with that they're making more money, because they're going to be doing it in a higher character way that I think has other value for others. That's, to me, why we're doing this.
So this is value destruction. Everything we see, it's value destruction.
And so if we can show them that actually they are destroying value by doing that, and they can increase their value, because at the end of the day, that's what they will care about. Then maybe, as they do this, they're going to increase these other things and it'll make us happier as they go along to
well, we hope there's a spillover from doing the right thing in the right way in the corporate sphere, that it helps in the society as well.
My question was wrong. We are all aware we want to, and we are all aware what we have to do. How to scale it? This was the question. How to scale it?
Well, we can talk about that after lunch.
And that's the core question, right? Because otherwise you feel you're
it's a little
on the margins and we're anecdotal.
How to scale it?
I'm trying. How do I get back to where I was before? Okay. Slide slow, yeah. There we go. Here, in my area, we look at. This is another part of pluralism under attack, which you may not be familiar with. It's looking at the world in a simplistic way. That's a problem. We always want the short hand version of everything. And it gets shorter and shorter. Okay? Until you get something which really doesn't make any sense. Now, the classic one is in my area is when, theory of comparative advantage. Each country is supposed to do what they're best at. They have these certain advantages, factors of production are not mobile, you do what you're best at, and then you trade and everything will be fantastic. Okay? So, what that means is you got Saudi Arabia just focuses on oil and oil-based products. And the Swiss, under the old system, would just focus on watches and watches, related products. Okay? Exploit the same set of skills. Okay. Look at this. Cesar Hidalgo at MIT took 5,000 products in our economy and looked at the connections between these 5,000 products, different areas, okay, and said, what's a strong economy? What's a weak economy? Is a strong economy one which specializes, or one which is diversified? Well, if you believe the theory, you just specialize. Okay? This is Saudi Arabia. Of those 5,000 products, it's all dominated just what? Bit of oil, some plastics, a refinery, and that's it. Okay? It's a $315 billion economy. Right? Now, you look at Switzerland. Doesn't have oil. Right? Doesn't have too many natural resources. But it focuses on being diversified. What does diversified mean exactly? I'll tell you. Look at the US.
The different colors are what?
Different colors are different groups of products. Okay? The US. Now you ask yourself which country is going to survive in the next 100 years in the long term. Okay? That reflects to me the US dominance. It is so well diversified. So many different skills are there. That's pluralistic approach to development.
And yet it has this
So that's the good news
impossible
of today,
social
huh?
mobility.
Impossible social mobility. Because the ownership of these.
Exactly. So
Right.
and yet, so again, it's not just one or the other.
And Hidalgo goes further. He says, look, what makes a strong economy? Pluralistic one, which is diversified, adaptable, lots of resources. If you don't have lots of resources, have lots of different skills, which are interchangeable. Bit like Legos. You don't want the same type of Lego. All you end up making is what? A wall or a brick. Okay? All right. I mean, the classic case was recently when, after 2008 crisis, the Swiss banks were forced to open up their accounts. Now, it's very difficult for Americans to put their money in Switzerland without too many questions and so on and so forth. Initially, the Swiss were dragging their feet, say, oh, no, privacy, can't have that, this, that, and the other. But in fact, they turned it into an advantage. They said, okay, we lose out in banking, but we still have our brand, which is privacy. And it's enshrouded in law. So what they did this, they opened new sectors. For example, data protection. In some countries, you have to open up data as the government wants it. But in Switzerland, new industry, put your servers here. We have mountains and then they're nice and cold. Put your servers there and we'll protect your data. So interchangeable skills, basically. All right? And they're very good at that. So such a small country with 7 million, it's punching well above its weight.
It's called adaptation, I believe.
That's right. And I think it's more open in terms of immigration than other countries. There, so something like what, 30% or more are foreigners?
Very high percentage.
Very high percentage.
In Ice Age, not the dinosaurs survived, but the ones who adapted, so the same.
Hidalgo only took 5,000 products. He said, look, Walmart has 100,000 products. Okay? Cities like London and the big capitals have 10 billion interconnected products. Economies are really complex. Right? So when people say, oh, let's look at GDP all day long, it's really misleading. You know? The number of times they get the forecasting wrong and they keep updating their forecast. What kind of forecast is that if you keep updating the weather check? You know, it's worse than the weather forecasters. Now, our brains have evolved with 300 products in mind. So really, the world is much more complicated than we think it is. Krugman. 9th of November, he says, you're looking for at a really big recession with no end in sight. 5 days later, he says this.
The same with Trump.
I mean, he's forced to make, the media or whoever it is forces him, or he, gives forecasts which sort of are meaningless. Just recently, Bank of England, Treasury, IMF, OECD, we're going to be into a massive recession in the UK after Brexit. Hold on.
Well, Brexit hasn't happened yet. It's the Brexit, but all they've done is voted on Brexit, but the UK is still part of the EU. Brexit hasn't happened. So
Well, guess
we don't
what?
know that that's wrong.
Australia is Brexit as well. It's not in the European Union. It still survives. Okay. Yeah. I mean, the way they portrayed it in the media is like you'll go from Paris, you'll drive to Calais, and then you take a boat and you'll fall off the cliff. That place won't exist. Hyperbole.
Fear.
Fear.
This is how you sell the news. Fear is the primary emotion that is taken by the brain. So.
And if you get the same 10 guys saying the same thing over and over again, you got problems.
But to maintain an economic system, you need people, these same 10 guys, because yes, they are guys actually, to say some things the same, because otherwise you can pull the plug really fast on an economy. If you're one of these guys saying, trust is huge in the economy, right? To have the economic system hold together. The faith in the system that actually works, because a lot of it's virtual.
Yep.
So unless you believe in it, or we, as a large community, buy into it, that's all that it's worth. It's worth what we believe. So it's as you say, it's complex, but you can't have, you can pull the plug on it too. Say, you know what, let's all say we're sinking, we will sink.
I mean, even after Brexit, we'll still pick up the phone and say, let's make a deal.
Yeah, but even forget Brexit, anything, 2008, whether or not it's over, is the recession over? It's debatable.
I mean, the definition of recession, how can you define a recession? How can you just say, well, 2 quarters of negative GDP growth? Is it as simple as that? Surely there are whole, if it's 0.1% growth, that means you're not in a recession. If it's minus 0.1% of growth, then you're in a recession. I tell you what, you won't feel the difference. 0.1% will feel just as bad as minus 0.1%. And aggregating it into one number is just ludicrous. Okay? And if I build another bomb, guess what? GDP goes up. GDP goes up. Production goes up. What does that mean to us? Really, it doesn't mean it's meaningless. So what's wrong with saying, I just don't know? None of these guys will come and say, I don't know. Don't ask me. I haven't got a clue. So, for your competency, for your company, there are 4 areas I'd focus on. First is, leaders have to focus on quality of data rather than quantity. Okay? Mr. Obama, I think last week, pointed out, he was looking for a legacy. He said, look, I created so many jobs. Under my administration, we created so many jobs. But look at the quality of those jobs. Right? 94% of the jobs, 94% of net job growth in the past decade was in the alternative work category. It's gig jobs. Jobs which say, would you like fries with this, sir? Okay. Or independent contractors. These are not quality jobs.
Yeah, they're all independent contractors.
But you're on the upper end. I'm talking about the lower end, where there is job security. Imagine you're coming out of university. You often get jobs with no job security, no health care.
This is also dependent on the effort the person has done, also on the chance the person has had. On the other hand, these people are not equal. They are equal in sense, but it's up to you how much you put in your brain and then how much you try to, So.
The other aspect is there's unpaid internships.
Sorry?
The unpaid internships, which come for newcomers trying to enter the job market. All right, you can't build houses and families and relationships based on what jobs which have very little security. Okay. In China they save 50% of their salary. Why? Why does the US only save 5% and China save 50%?
I don't disagree with the focus on quality, but I have issues with the way you're looking at this data, because I think you could break it down more and look at how many of these jobs are kind of part-time, low-income jobs. But there is societally a rise in independent contractors, freelancers, and a lot of that is not low income. And there is a movement toward less stable kind of 9-to-5 full-time employment, which isn't necessarily bad, and it doesn't mean you can't pay a mortgage. And lots of us in this room easily pay our mortgages with that kind of work. And in reading, it looks like that's becoming more and more prevalent. So I guess I would say, just on this particular detail, that I would love to see the breakdown of the data.
I'm not getting that from my ex-students. I'm not getting what you're saying from my students who've graduated from university and coming back to see me.
But I'm saying within that data set,
it might be a generational change.
Yes.
How do you have how much out of this 94% is on skilled freelancers, and do you have such?
No, I haven't got that data.
Okay, so this is how it answers
that'd be interesting to know.
persons represented.
The other way of looking at quality is this. The second one, I'm sorry, it's not really big. You've got health expenditure and you've got life expectancy. Okay? What you want is spend as little as possible on health and live as long as possible. Okay? So you're finding that, countries like, if I see it here, Chile, South Korea, Greece, are spending very little and getting reasonable outcomes on this end. And then you've got the Swiss paying heck of a lot and also getting a high outcome. And then you've got the US in a world of its own.
That's the big strong line?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it goes over quite a few years. It's not just any one single president or anything like that, much longer. There's a trend, clear trend. Okay. Right. So the point I'm making, just get under the skin of the data that you get.
Yeah, look for the quality. And
That's right. You have to criticize the hell out of the data.
Yeah.
Challenge it.
Then the headline. Leaders, avoid surrounding yourself with the same views.
Little complexity.
That's also from mindfulness perspective, the Aristotle one.
Reliable way to make people believe in falsehood is what? Frequent repetition. Avoid the Kodak syndrome. Third one. Embrace your DNA defect.
By the way, how do you explain this with Trump and Simpsons? How do you explain that? You know the pictures.
The Trump and I haven't seen that picture.
It was Trump on a slide, yeah. And Simpsons, in Simpsons, it was the same pictures. Didn't you see? It was many years ago in the it was a cartoon with Simpsons, and they had the same pictures, the same frames. And if you stop the movie, you would see the same frame with Trump today. And there are two like this. Yeah, I was curious if you knew. We will talk in the break. I will show it to you in the break. No.
The one on the left is this famous story about a second-hand car salesman in the US who couldn't sell cars. So he decided to have 50% off. And he still couldn't sell any cars. So his friend said, why don't you do this? Why don't you have buy one, get one free? All his cars sold. So, when the financial crisis hit in 2008, a psychologist at Yale called Laurie Santos works with rhesus monkeys on an island off Puerto Rico. And she did the similar experiment with monkeys. This 50% off versus buy one, get one free. And the monkeys behaved exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. They went for the buy one, get one free rather than 50% off. She trained monkeys with, by giving them grapes. Two choices. Okay, one of them was one grape, but as soon as a monkey wants to collects that grape, she puts another grape. The alternative was 3 grapes, and as soon as a monkey goes to collect 3 grapes, she takes one out. You could see which one was more popular. So the idea was she's tried lots of experiments. Are we similar? Is this something in our DNA that we behave the way we behave? And monkeys obviously don't have mobile phones and laptops and all the rest of it.
Not yet.
And not yet. And she found the same thing. A lot of our behavior is instinct. We can't help it. We just can't help it.
But we're also designed in those same studies, not hers, but others, with monkeys, to be all the things that these things, to be compassionate, to protect not our own. We've observed things in nature that are not necessarily not only dominated by greed and manipulation.
So the idea is, at least we can have some safeguards, knowing our defects. And the last one. Some types of new knowledge only comes from trying it out. The recent argument is, should we give basic guaranteed income to citizens or not? And we could sit here all day long discussing yes, no, yes, no. But some things, just try it out. Like the Finns have started doing. It just started this experiment. They won't know until another couple of years just how people behave. With my students, I like to, the reverse monopoly. I give them a monopoly board and I say, change the rules. And the outcome I want is greater level of equality or equity. Reverse the monopoly. What rules do you need to change? I want this game to go on perpetually, but as the game goes on longer and longer, I want more greater and greater equality. Can you give me a new set of rules? So simulations are a good way of try it out. In fact, the person who invented the monopoly was basically an anti-monopolist. She was an anti-monopolist. She wanted, in fact, so why on earth do you tax income? Surely you should be taxing fruits of nature. Because a piece of land belongs to everyone. It's not just your personal property. The house on it might belong to you, but the land underneath is a gift of nature. And I think that's the end.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.